Gwen kicked her feet futilely against the arm of the monstrous creature before her, understanding, for the first time, just why it was that her brother hated clowns. Staring into the sunken yellow eyes and feeling the awful breath from the thing's stained yellow teeth, she wasn't feeling very warm about the idea of clowns either. Dipper smacked the thing across the back with one of the studio chairs, only for it to be less than useless. The chair dented against the guy's skin, but another clown grabbed him, throwing him to the back. Dipper stared up at the other clown that was towering over him, regretting for the first time his decision to not learn how to fight. You know, Gideon's voice rang in Dipper's ears, I'm starting to get why he wants y'all gone so badly. You folks have no manners, Gideon said, casually watching from his chair. Will you shut? Dipper's breath was forced out of his mouth as one of Zombozo's backup clowns kneed him in the gut. Gwen managed, just barely, to mutter out a spell. She could barely remember what spells she did have written out in her journal, especially what those spells did, but anything at this point was better than standing less of a chance than nothing. Her hand glowed with a bright purple aura as the clown thrashing Dipper flew into a nearby wall. Huh, now where did y'all learn that? Gideon muttered as the clown attacking Gwen continued its assault. Zombozo threw the girl upwards, Dipper running over to catch her. He managed to, just barely. But then both of them tumbled to the ground, barely having a second to catch their breath before the clown brigade was up and running again. How many spells did you learn again, Gwen? Dipper groaned out, already not feeling up to this fight. He was a thinker, and he was a pretty good one, but he wasn't really made for the whole heat of combat thing. Maybe 3, Gwen replied. She had written down dozens in her personal notebook, but she doubted there was going to be a timeout in the middle of the showdown for her to study that notebook. And I officially know what one of them does, she half-joked, knowing that she could barely remember the other ones. Dipper groaned. Okay, that's fine. We got this, right? Gwen looked at him. Sure, she said, very unsure of herself. That's a great attitude, Dipper said back. He clenched his fist sloppily. He knew he wasn't going to do much damage compared to Gwen, even if she was new at the whole magic thing. So, knowing the situation at hand, he found himself deeply wishing for the other Tennyson to be here too. He hoped, wherever Ben was, he was okay, and that he kicked whoever's butt he was kicking, probably Charmcaster's, quickly, because they were definitely going to need a lifeline. Ben had created a tornado with the speedster form before, but what he was trying to do now took way more focus, way more power. Heck, it was probably just a bad idea, but there was no time to decide that now. Hope, Charmcaster, whatever the girl wanted to call herself, was capable of creating a near-endless source of monsters. But if he could destroy them all at once, he could probably end the whole fight in one strike. He got 2 goes at hero time this fight, and he knew he probably wasn't going to get a third. He had 8 minutes left on his transformation. He'd been counting, or at least trying to, like his family taught him during their makeshift training sessions. He needed to be calm, thoughtful, like Gwen and Dipper. Man, he wished they were here right now. Or maybe Mabel just to add a touch of chaos that Hope couldn't account for. Any backup, really. Instead, Ben would just have to settle for thinking like them, coming up with a plan that they would be proud of. He settled on riding a piece of dirt from the rubble, surging his heat as much as possible as he circled Hope with all of his might. Fire tornado. Ben made 1 lap, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20, all in the span of just a few moments. The air around him surged in a heat, a wall of red-hot flame blocking out Hope from the outside. All she could see in this moment was flame, like the rest of the forest had just dropped out, completely disappeared along with her stone golems, obliterated by the surging flames, not strong enough to maintain their form in this unrelenting onslaught. Even the rock that Hope herself had been riding collapsed into nothing but a heap of dust and rubble. She forced herself to the ground in an instant, as the air around her continued to heat. It was almost like she was stuck in an oven. The consciousness was being blasted out of her body by the waves of heat from every direction. Well played, Tennyson, she said, as loudly as her body would allow, not coming up any louder than a whisper. She channeled magical energy into her palms, watching the vortex swirl around her. Her best chance of getting out of this would be to tag Ben in motion, but she could barely track him. Her eyes were spinning just trying to get a glimpse. Throwing a blast blindly would be next to pointless. So, Hope tried something new. Something else. She concentrated all the power into her body, letting it build to the point that it hurt, forcing herself to endure not just that pain, but the pain from the outside. Just 1 moment. That was all she needed. She had to win. No, it wasn't that she had to win. She couldn't afford to lose. If she did, her father, he'd be lost forever. She couldn't lose sight of that. She lifted her arms and forced a scream from the depths of her soul. Magic erupted from her body in a sphere of pure destruction that echoed against Ben's vortex, disrupting it and pushing it outwards. The blast took Ben with it. The rock he was riding on disrupted itself, wavering and collapsing under his feet as he fell full force into the forest, erupting into a cloud of dust and rubble. I try to come up with a plan and this is what happens. Face it, Tennyson. Thinking isn't your strong suit. Ben grumbled through Heat Blast's deep voice. He managed, just barely, to conjure enough firepower to blast the newfound rubble off of him. Unfortunately, he was wiped. He had never felt this tired in an alien form before. He could barely feel his rocky body. The flames on his head had all but died out, and he couldn't feel them coming back anytime soon. Out of power before a timeout. Well, that's a new one. Ben managed to grunt out. Hope reappeared, lumbering towards him. She looked just as ragged as he did, magic flickering at her fingertips like small sparklers attached to her hands. Little fireworks. We really did a number on each other, didn't we? Hope asked. Yeah, not exactly holding back, are we? Ben replied, looking down at his palms. The heat in his body still dimmed out. He had maybe 2 minutes left on the watch. Ben would have to win in those 2 minutes, without his strength. He let himself laugh, just a little. Well, you didn't seem like the type to give up easily, Hope said, her flickers concentrating into what would probably be the last attack she was capable of. Ben watched it, and he took in as big of a breath as he could, welcoming as much oxygen into his system as he could to ignite one last fireball. Yeah, I'm real stubborn like that, Ben replied. I think we both know the next one's it, right? He asked. Hope paused, the honesty of Ben's statement puzzling her for a moment. He really didn't like to keep his cards close to his chest, did he? Yeah, it looks like it, she replied, honestly. Well, before one of us takes home the crown, you gonna tell me why you were doing any of this? Why pretend to be my friend? Ben asked. Okay. I know you haven't exactly had the easiest life up to this point, and what I'm about to say won't make it any easier. In fact, it will probably just be rubbing salt in the wound. But you deserve an answer. What happened to your mom? She began, Ben flinching. His mom had died in an accident. Well, what he and the others had been suspecting wasn't an accident since they encountered the gnomes that sent them on this whole quest in the first place. The gnomes had practically been bragging about the fact that they knew who killed Dipper and Mabel's parents. And it had all but confessed that the thing that killed their parents was the same thing that got his mom killed. The thing that was responsible, Hope continued. It has something I need, she said, before finally stopping herself in her tracks. That's all you're gonna tell me, isn't it? Ben asked. If Heat Glass had a heart, Ben was sure it would be thumping in his chest, banging like a drum. Heck, he was half sure it was. He could barely think straight, let alone think about both this and not getting pummeled into the ground. He was practically hoping, praying that his words were right. If the boy was being honest with himself, he didn't really want to hear anything else. Hope just nodded, not another sound coming out of her mouth. Well then, I guess that's just gonna have to do, Ben replied. Ben reeled back his hand as Charmcaster did the same. They both threw their hands forward, letting their powers fly through the air, just in time for Ben's watch to flash, turning him back into a human. Both of their eyes widened, knowing that, if she did hit, it was going to hit him as a human. No resistances, no durability, no nothing. Yeah, Ben thought to himself. Make a friend and she ends up killing ya. Sounds like your luck these days, Tennyson. Ben felt an impact as he fell to the ground. He expected it to hurt more. A lot more. Or blood or something, but it just kind of felt like getting tackled. He didn't even hear the explosion until a few seconds later. And from behind him? Wait, what? Ben looked up to see... Mabel? He asked, staring at the girl's exhausted face. She tackled him out of the way. How did she even get here? Hi, Gus, she breathed out, flopping on the ground next to him. I got here just in time, huh? She asked, Ben glancing at the trees behind him, seeing a smoldering cracked wreck where the trees used to be. She really must have put her all into that blast. How did you even know I saw a light, figured, heat blast, ran here. Man, why'd you have to be so far away? Mabel joked. I'm gonna need my own space watch if I'm gonna keep helping you, Mr. Superhero. She looked at Ben, who paused, his mind deep in thought. Ben 10, big super guy. You alright, Holmes? Ben cracked a smile. Yeah, just catching my breath, he replied. And being thankful, he thought, again realizing that he didn't have to go through all of this by himself. Thanks, cuz. No problem, she said, helping him to his feet. Actually, it was a lot of a problem, but no problem for you, she grinned. The pair of them looked over to Charmcaster's passed-out body, crashed into the forest wood. Bad breakup? She asked. She wasn't my girlfriend, Ben responded. But, yeah, kind of. Turns out she was actually magic. Ha! I told you it was real, Mabel replied. Yeah, you did. Ben laughed slightly, his ribs stinging his body. I owe you $10. Did we bet on this? Let's say, I owe you one anyway, Ben replied. Sweet, I can use the money to bribe you more, Mabel said back. Next adventure's free. I'm gonna hold you to that, Tennyson, Mabel replied. So, what do we do with her? Mabel asked. Well, first off, Ben took the spell book from Charmcaster's side, picking it up and putting it away. He doubted it was the source of all of her powers, but at the very least it would keep her from getting more dangerous. He looked down at her body. Well, she knows things about what happened to us, our parents, Ben replied. Mabel's eyes widened, a mix of shock and nausea overcoming her. She pretty much looked like she was about to keel over on the spot. And about the thing that did it, Ben continued. The thing? Mabel asked, her voice clearly slightly wavering. I don't know, that's what she called it. Whatever it was, I don't think it's human, Ben said flatly. Neither him nor Mabel wanted to think about whatever kind of eldritch abomination that the girl had probably meant. She said it had something she needed? I don't really think she's a bad guy, Mabel. Not really, you know? Mabel glanced at the smoldering pile behind him. You think I'm being stupid, don't you? Ben asked. Well, probably, but I trust you, cuz, Mabel replied, her normal happy tone still recovering from the information Ben dropped on her. Besides, it's not like we could just lock her up with Gideon, right? He said, her eyes suddenly shooting wide. Oh my god, Gideon. Huh? Ben said, turning around to see Mabel already running into the forest, him darting after her. Mabel probably ran with the same level of intensity to find him, which meant she was probably thinking that Dipper or Gwen were in danger. And if she was right about Ben... hang on, Gwen, Ben grunted, trying and failing to keep pace with Mabel. Things were going better for a short period of time. Gwen's magic was able to keep the hench clowns off their backs. Her gymnastic training had given her the ability to dodge out of the way until she got a few spells off. She blasted one through the ceiling, increased gravity on another. She tried blasting another one only for her spell to fail and just make useless sparkles. Something that probably would have gotten her killed with the clown next to Dipper lunging after her, but thankfully Dipper was still there. Following up and whacking the guy with the chair, making him stagger back just in time for Gwen to switch to another one of her more successful spells. She really needed to learn what spell did what when she got back, but she hadn't expected to be throwing down so soon after their last encounter. She hadn't even fought the last time they had to go toe-to-toe with somebody and she was still exhausted. As she continued fighting, she thought, this made her respect Ben a bit more, not that she'd ever actually tell the doofus. There was just one last guy to face down, and she was confident that together, she and Dipper could probably take him. Gideon would be out of bodyguards, and they would win. She charged at Zombozo, trying to hit him with a blast, but he just moved out of the way, quickly and almost absurdly fast. His body was lurching and bending in a way that no human body ever should be able to. He appeared in front of her almost instantly. Dipper pushed him to the side just enough for him to miss his target, lurching past Gwen, giving her just enough time to increase gravity again, holding the clown to the floor. But this guy didn't pass out like the other clown did. But at the very least, he couldn't move. Did we win? Dipper asked. No, not quite, Gideon replied, flicking his hand and throwing Gwen off balance. Gwen's spell deactivated, giving Zombozo a chance to get up. Dipper tried to move to stop Gideon, only for him to simply move his other hand, lifting Dipper to the ceiling. What the? You're supposed to be a fake! Dipper grunted out, trying to move as much as he could, his muscles not cooperating him for even a second. Oh, a fake? Ah, nah, neither one of us is fake. That's probably why Big Ben hasn't turned up. Army must have been a bit too much for him. One totem off the old checklist. You better hope that's not true, Dipper shouted. Well, you tell me. Would Tennyson have stayed out this late if there wasn't a problem? Gideon asked. Because if he won, I'd expect him to be busting down my door by now. But all we got here are y'all. Gwen's mind tried shutting his words out. Ben had done stupid things. he'd even disappeared every now and then. Gone out, been stupid. Heck, he'd been even more stupid since their mom died, but not ever would Ben just disappear like this. When he was going out with somebody that Gwen thought was dangerous or doing something dangerous, he'd always come back and he'd always at least let her know that he was fine. But she couldn't let herself believe that anything had actually happened to him, that... Zombozo grabbed the girl's neck with his twisted and messed up arm. Gwen forced herself to look down at the thing attacking her, its body snapping back into place like some sort of demented jigsaw puzzle. As she watched her own hand grow pale, and then paler, and paler still, like her hand was made of paper, she felt herself getting weaker, like the blood in her veins had stopped giving her life and just started deciding to weigh her down. Like somebody had strapped dumbbells to every inch of her body. Dipper looked down at her, at Zombozo, and he searched his brain for anything in the journal that would explain this. Anything. Zombies. The undead. The people who drained others to keep themselves up and running. Who left their victims nothing but husks of corpses on the ground. He honestly didn't know whether that was better or worse than the zombies he'd seen in movies. Wait. Zombozo. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Dipper groaned, Gideon looking up at him. Well, that's interesting. How'd you know what my little clown was? Gideon half-clenched his fist, bringing Dipper closer to him, as Dipper continued to thrash against Gideon's harsh telekinetic grip. You didn't happen to read about it, did you? Well, you didn't happen to read about it, did you? Gideon asked, Dipper's eyes widening. This guy had a journal? Was that how he got his powers? Oh, you did. I was right. There is a journal on your land. Probably borrowed it from Stanford, didn't you? What? Dipper asked. Did this guy think that his grunkle knew about the journal? That he even knew about the paranormal in the first place? As much as Dipper actually liked his grunkle, the guy was probably about as far from a paranormal scholar as you could possibly be. His shop was just full of stuff like Bigfoot trinkets and sewn together mermaids. He couldn't even get a real Atlantean skeleton, and everybody knew those guys existed. Dipper looked over to Gwen. It had only gotten worse. She lost the ability to stand on her feet properly, and her body kept kneeling to the ground. Stop! Stop! If you stop, I'll tell you whatever you want, Dipper replied. Well, that's a nice offer, but I'll get it out of you later, Gideon responded, looking at Dipper with a wicked glint in his eye. Once she's out of the way, that's the last of the dangerous folk in your family. Then we can have a nice long chat. And once I'm done talking to you, me and Mabel live happily ever after. Dipper gritted his teeth. There was nothing that he could do, nothing that would... He watched the scene before him again, watched Gwen. When Gideon had mentioned that he was going to get rid of the dangerous people in her family, a little bit of color came back to her, like her magic had spiked up or something. He didn't think that was how it worked, but it was as if somehow her anger for her family spiked her magic up, was bringing her back to her full strength, and it might just be their ticket out of here. He was definitely going to have to apologize to Gwen later for what he was about to do. You're hurting us. You're killing Gwen. Keep saying you killed Ben, Dipper shouted, saying something that he hoped himself wasn't true. He watched the air around Gwen almost seem to change, shifting like he was staring at her through a heat wave. Well, I didn't do nothing. Charmcaster probably did. I don't like to get my little hands dirty. Knowing her powers, she probably just left him buried on a mountain somewhere. Gideon's voice came out, and the ground beneath Gwen's feet started cracking and splintering. Gideon got ever so slightly closer to Dipper. And you're not gonna die. Not until you scream out everything I want from you. Gideon's confident voice disappeared beneath the weight of Zombozo's scream. The color in Gwen's face was coming back all right, along with some new color. Her hair started glowing, moving in purple waves as she stared back at Gideon, with purple spotlights that had taken the place of her pupils. In one motion, she threw Zombozo aside, hard enough for the clown to tear through the side like a cannonball going through parchment. Dipper looked over at her. He was expecting maybe a burst of magic, but this? He had only ever skimmed most of the journal, but he had definitely never seen anything like it in there. Was this still magic? Gideon raised his hand, pushing against Gwen with his telekinetic power, but she barely budged, pushed maybe a foot back before she kept walking forward. Gideon dropped Dipper from his other grasp, using both of his hands to attempt, in vain, to restrain the force of nature walking toward him. In his deep train of thought, the necklace around Gideon's neck began to glow. As he pushed harder and harder, it glowed even more. The same color as his hands and eyes. If Dipper were a betting guy, he'd guess that was what was powering him. Stop hurting my family, Gwen shouted, a burst of energy leaving her, one that pushed Gideon to his knees. If he was ever going to be able to take that thing off Gideon, Dipper was going to bet it would be right now. So, steeling himself, he ran toward the psychic, who noticed him a split second too late. Dipper grabbed the necklace with all of his might, and he pulled. Gideon screamed out, letting loose one last burst of power as the necklace popped off. The explosion was big enough to send Dipper hurtling out of the tent and through the air, sure that when he landed, he was going to break some part of his body, if not every part of his body. He closed his eyes and waited for an impact that never came. When he opened them, he found himself staring at Accelerate, and Mabel draped around the creature's shoulders. Less than a second later, he found himself back inside the tent. Ben? You're okay, Dipper said, sighing in relief as Ben put him down. Gwen met eyes with her brother, the fury leaving her face as the purple light faded from her body. She stumbled downward, Ben rushing to her side to catch her. Not a second later, Gwen had Ben in a bear hug as he helped her back to her feet. Mabel was smiling, doing the same to her own brother. Don't scare me like that, doofus, Gwen shouted. Probably 1,000 different snarky remarks flashed through Ben's mind in the moment. He settled on the nicest one. Purple looked good on you, dweeb, he replied, the Omnitrix beeping and flashing him back to normal for what Ben hoped would be the last time that day. Also, since when could you do all that? Ben asked in his normal voice. I don't really know. To be honest, I don't even know what that was. I just was talking about how he hurt you, and Gwen looked away, slightly embarrassed to be talking about the fact that she actually cared about her twin brother. Aw, you do love me, Ben nudged her. Of course I do, you moron, she scoffed. Meanwhile, Dipper was still getting the life hugged out of him by Mabel, who was glancing over at his injuries at the same time. I'm fine, Mabel, Dipper replied. Fine? Look how many bruises you got on you, bro, Mabel argued. Yeah, well, your boyfriend there was tougher than he looked. Ow! Dipper joked, Mabel punching him in the arm. Just said I was bruised. And now you got one more, Mabel replied, laughing. The nice moment died down as the Pines-Tennyson family heard the scurried footsteps of Gideon trying to slink away. Dipper and Mabel stepped in front of him. Well, my little Mabel, I'm sure we can... I'm not dating you, Mabel responded. For the first time in a while, there was genuine anger in her voice. She surprised herself with that tone. The rest of Mabel's family gathered around her. You wanted information from us? Well, the shoe is on the other foot, Pompadour, Dipper said, staring down at the nervous wreck of a boy beneath him. Talk. Who gave you this thing? Dipper said, holding up the paper with a cipher wheel on it. Ben and Mabel laid eyes on it at the same time. At the figure in the center of it, its eye almost seemed to be staring back at them. Who's sending you guys after us? Gideon laughed to himself. Tell you what? Are you gonna arrest little old me? Where you gonna put me, huh? What cop is gonna believe this story? He asked. Arrest you? Ben asked. Nah, I was thinking of having forearms throw you into the nearest canyon, Ben replied. Or, I could use you to test out some new spells. Gwen gritted her teeth. Or I could just smack you with whatever I find on the ground, Dipper added on. Gideon looked to Mabel, almost like she was his salvation in this moment. He didn't meet his eyeline, instead looking toward Ben. I think Diamond Head could throw him farther, she replied, Ben pulling out his still timed-out Omnitrix. Not that Gideon knew what the thing looked like when it was out of juice. Okay, wait a minute, his name is Bill! Gideon shouted out, closing his eyes. He opened them slowly to see the Pines-Tennyson family impatiently waiting for him to continue. Bill Cipher. Wait, so the guy who's been tormenting us is named Bill? Ben asked. Not a guy, a demon. A being of immeasurable power, Gideon continued. Trust me when I say, guy's a real monster. A being of immeasurable power who needs you? Dipper asked back. Who needs a pack of gnomes? Seriously? Well, he can't make his way here just yet. At least not physically, Gideon replied. And why's that? Gwen asked, Gideon shaking his head. She clenched her fist and began muttering the beginnings of a spell. I don't know why, Gideon blurted out. He won't tell me, he just told me to prepare, that if I made this place easier to conquer, he might, give me what I wanted. Dipper rolled his eyes. Of course that was what Gideon wanted. He seemed like the power-hungry type. Heck, he was a 12-year-old who wore suits everywhere. He'd be surprised if there was much more beneath the surface. And the preparation has something to do with this wheel thing? Gwen asked. It's kinda like a list. A list of people that Bill wants gone. Each symbol corresponds to the person. And that list includes us? We can't be the people who pose more danger to a demon than the frickin' Justice League, he said. Well, I thought the same thing, but he assured me that if he comes into this world, there's really nothing any of those folks can do about it. Not even Big Blue would be a real threat. But he's sure that you guys would, or at least be a problem, for some reason, Gideon continued. Why? Gwen asked again, a bit more forcefully. I don't know anything, honest. I told y'all everything. Gideon raised his hands in the air in surrender. The 4 family members looked at each other, nodding before walking out, carrying Gideon's necklace with them. At the very least, they had managed to depower him. In their book, that was the best victory they were probably going to get. And at the very least, they knew who they were fighting, that pyramid guy. And if they knew that, they could at least be a little bit more prepared. It was late at night, after the craziness of the day had subsided, when Ben woke up, Gwen being the one shaking him awake. He jerked up, half expecting to see someone attacking them again, only to see that Dipper and Mabel were still asleep, snoring without a care in the world. What time is it? Ben asked. Early enough, Gwen replied, the moonlight still casting a glint on her face. Ben, I told you what happened today, right? Yeah, and I saw some of it too. The purple hair, glowing, all of that, Ben said, wiping sleep out of his eyes. Well, how do you do it? She asked. Ben cocked an eyebrow. When you go hero, I felt fine when I was casting, but when I went all glowy, I couldn't tell how much power I was using. I think I was only able to use that power because I got mad, but keep thinking about it, she said. About the power? Ben asked. It didn't feel normal, Ben. Not even for magic, it felt off. Like I wasn't in control of myself. Even if Gideon is the worst? Ben asked, to Gwen's nodding. Yeah, even if he is the worst, what if I went too far? I wouldn't want to, Gwen said. Ben found himself nodding. I don't think I can help you too much there, sis. A lot of it's just instinct and Dipper, Ben replied. As much as Ben hated the training regimen Dipper made him do, it had made him a lot better at controlling his aliens, knowing their limits, their tricks. He probably wouldn't have done nearly as well in his fight with Charmcaster without that knowledge. But how about this? Next time Pines is torturing me out there, I'll make sure he tortures you too. Then we'll figure it out together, alright? Gwen smiled. And here I thought I was the responsible twin. Well, you have to let your dumb brother take care of you sometimes, right? Ben smiled back. Thanks, doofus. No problem, dweeb. Inside of an abandoned mall, the dust bunnies in the air thick enough to choke the lungs of anyone unprepared, a small mouse scurried. A mouse that didn't go more than 5 feet without getting scooped up by something bigger. A monstrous creature, teeth as sharp as daggers, that somehow, for some reason, didn't just kill the creature in front of it. Instead, it scurried down the abandoned halls, depositing it, mostly unharmed, into the grimy hands of a tall, gray-haired man. A man who clutched it in his palm, dropping it into a glass chamber. Aliens, a transforming boy, psychic circus performers. This town is finally getting interesting again. It's a shame you're not here to see it, Stanford. He smiled with his gnarled yellow teeth. But not to worry, old friend. I will see our experiments through to the end. With the power this cipher offers, the world will kneel to the power of Dr. Animo. At the edge of town, a boy got off a bus, looking at a sign above him. Welcome to Gravity Falls, displayed very proudly on it. He grinned. A sleepy town, huh? He asked himself. Not where I'd expect alien tech to show up, but should be easy pickings. He crossed into the town line, not fully knowing what he had just gotten himself into. Well, Levin, the boy said to himself. About time you earned a break. Hey y'all, it was really great for me to be able to go back into this corner of the Earth OCU universe, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it too. I'm glad to be done with the Gideon arc, since that stretched a bit further than intended. But if you want to see more of this series, then be sure to check out the playlist, since there are more Omni Falls videos there. And if you like this weird connected universe that I created, then be sure to let me know with a like or hit subscribe, so you don't miss out on more fun in the future. Until then, I've been your captain, and it's been a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. Bye now!